Okay, sorry for the wait. Sorry we got off to a later start than planned, but at least I am still sort of on time. Those of you who know me know I'm never on time. But I am going to introduce Nathalie. I sort of did earlier a little bit, so if I jump quickly ahead, then we're going to give her the floor because I know everyone here is going to be super interested in what she has to share with us today. Already the show and tell is like, what? So Nathalie B, simpler, lighter, more affordable horizontal beekeeping for backyards and homesteads. Her bio is really long.
Oh my.
Yeah. I didn't even try to shorten it. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to, so I won't talk to this. She can talk about herself, and I will pass it over. Do we want to switch computers?
Have the password for the network. I just realized that.
Oh. Karen, could we have some help getting the password for the network?
So I can do
No, we have a different one for over here.
Anyway, while we do that, I just was gonna. Most of you know me, but really quickly, I have 400 colonies scattered all over the place because I do ag valuation services for using beekeeping as a qualifying activity. That's my specialty, and I do workshops and apprenticeships. And I'm a master craftsman, and I'm a professional educator. That's kind of my passion. My passion is also to spread the word about horizontal top-bar beekeeping and treatment-free beekeeping for backyard beekeepers. And that's kind of what I'm all about. So I speak all over the country and even internationally doing that. So if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer. So
Help is on the way.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Worst person.
Oh, I should have done that before, but yeah. It's all good.
I just looked up and went, oh, she's not at your table anymore.
Step down.
Okay.
We'll get there. I'll tap dance in the meantime.
Well, in the meantime, are there any questions? Does anyone have anything they want to share or ask while we are in transition of computering?
There she is. And it's right there for you. Yeah. Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to talk about my favorite topic today, which is basically simpler, lighter, more affordable beekeeping for homesteads and backyards. And I'm going to touch a quick word about natural treatment-free beekeeping at the request of my hosts because they liked my spectrum slides. So I'll get into that very quickly and give you a recap, and then talk about these horizontal top-bar hives and their advantages for small-scale beekeeping. And then I have allergies, so if I cough in the middle of a sentence, please forgive me. Excuse me. And then I'll talk about the flex hive, which is this contraption over there. That's basically the marriage between a Langstroth and a top-bar hive that allows anybody to try both, and we'll talk about that in more details. No, from the start.
Okay, from the start.
Yeah, good to go. Thank you. And do I have a remote? Stephanie, do you have a remote?
I do not have one.
Okay, so I'll try with this one. Hopefully it'll work. If not, I'll click on everything.
I have batteries.
I'm good. I got to stay by the microphone anyway, so I'm kind of prisoner from this. Anyway, I'm going to talk about flexibility as the future of backyard beekeeping, introducing those concepts. Feel free to interrupt me at any point. I'm always game for answering questions. If there's something that doesn't make sense, just let me know. Raise your hand. I'll be there. So that spectrum slide that I was talking about, we're all on the spectrum, right? What spectrum? Well, so far I'm the most perfectly normal person I know, right? Hey, Maria Louise. And there's other spectrums. It depends where you stand in terms of, beekeeping style, what are your goals or your philosophy, and in particular when it comes to treatments. So a lot of people will tell you if you don't treat your bees, they will die. I'm here to tell you it's not necessarily true. I apologize. But you have interventions, and the spectrum of interventions is from the most to the right to the least to the left, okay? And I'm going to walk you through the various, options, generally speaking, that you can go from one to the other. It's very important to remember that we keep our bees whichever way we like, okay? Excuse me. We get to decide what our philosophy, what our goals are, and based on that, we intervene in terms of pests. The biggest pest that we have in beekeeping right now is the varroa mite. And it's a parasite that wreaks havoc on colonies that are unfit and transfers viruses. So that's been the downside of beekeeping is that you have to deal with those at some point because they are in all our hives, okay? But the way we deal with them can vary. So on the extreme side, you're gonna see chemical treatments. So beekeepers will introduce any kind of like oil-soluble synthetic chemicals to knock back the population of the mite and kill those mites without, that's to say, without killing the bees or without quote unquote harming them. In reality, it all takes a trade. It all takes a toll on the bees, right? There's a cost and a trade-off for everything. So things like amitraz, fluvalinate, coumaphos. There's a whole lot of synthetic chemicals that are that have actually led to creating resistance into the parasites as well that are no longer efficient because of it, because they've been used so much. So if you're at that extreme, that's totally acceptable. And I'm here to tell you there's other ways. So a lesser interventionist approach would be to use what we call organic chemicals or organic treatments. So organic is really having an atom of carbon is anything that's going to be organic, right? And it doesn't mean it's innocuous. So all the organic acids, oxalic, formic, all the thymol, the essential oils, all that stuff is categorized under organic chemicals. And yes, essential oils are chemicals because they're hyper concentrated, so are those acids. And because of that, they take a toll on the colony of bees. Again, there's a trade-off, and it impacts them negatively. Also, some of the oils can embed themselves into the beeswax and cause accumulation and issues. But then the next intervention, so we're going less and less intervention. You can also use biomechanical treatments. Again, anything that's an intervention meant to knock back the population of the pest is a treatment. Is feeding a treatment? It's not meant to knock back the pest population. It's just meant to prevent starvation. So as such, it is not a treatment. A treatment is anything you do to a colony of bees so that you knock back the pest population and prop those genetics to stay alive where they might not have otherwise because of the pest pressure, okay? So feeding is not a treatment. So biomechanical treatments are anything that you do that's not involving a foreign substance, but that still interferes with the pest population. Things like preventing the queen from raising brood, caging the queen. It's called a forced brood break, is a treatment because while she's not raising brood, they're not raising mites. Okay, remember the pollen substitute we were talking about earlier. Same thing with the drone culling and drone removal. So in the spring, when the colony feels, swarmy, reproductive, it raises a lot of drones. And the mites prefer those because they take longer to develop so they can make more baby mites. So if you take the comb that has drones, you can remove it, freeze it, and then you've killed a whole bunch of mites. That's a treatment. So those colonies are not sustaining themselves. You're helping them out. Mite counts are very often, that's not a treatment itself, but it will lead to the intervention because you're going to panic because there's a lot of mites. Or there's a low mite count, and then you're going to think, well, I'm fine, where they might all be under the cappings of the drones or the worker bees. So it's not telling you that much information. Sugar dusting is another biomechanical treatment where you sprinkle a lot of powdered sugar. It has a whole host of unintended consequences, but the key, like clogging the spiracle, the breathing tubes of the bees and the baby bees, and it actually does more harm than good, and it also knocks back the pest population, so that is a treatment. But all of those so far are interventions meant to prop up genetics that are not necessarily fit. You're artificially, the beekeeper is doing something to keep those bees alive because otherwise they wouldn't, because those genetics are actually unfit, meaning they cannot survive on their own, right? On the other side of that, you have fitness, and where nature tends to do its job without the bees basically take care of themselves. So you have on the closest side to the treatments, you have treatment-free beekeeping, which is kind of what I've been doing for a long time. And you leverage bee biology. You understand bee biology to make sure that you're not feeding pollen substitutes, because that's going to raise a lot of baby bees, and then you're going to have more mites. You can requeen with fit genetics, so there's an intervention there. When you do that, you're really euthanizing the previous genetic line and replacing it with something that you think is going to be a little bit more fit, like locally adapted survivor stock queens, certified Russians, or treatment-free genetics from a reputable supplier. So those are actual interventions. And you can also, you're going to actively cull the weak. If they're not doing good, you might combine them, take the queen out, and then you're going to allow the stronger genetics to reproduce and maybe do some splits from that standpoint. So that's treatment-free. You're not using really treatments, and it's actually leveraging bee biology. And then on the extreme other side of the spectrum, you have what I call strict natural selection. And I'm going to that extreme a little bit more because I'm trusting the bees to be able to select themselves into fitness, right? And I'm just kind of leveraging their biology, allow them, when they feel swarmy, to reproduce. I'll preemptively harvest a split, and then I'll have a new queen that's going to mate in open drone congregation area, open mate. And you're going to have more genetics coming in. You can catch swarms. You can do all of that stuff. I came up with that slide when I spoke in Australia. They just got the mite incursion about 3-4 years ago, and their bees were naive to the mites, so they were basically going to have high losses. And their concentration in nature is about 4 times what we see in other countries where we've seen this high concentration of bees in the wild. High numbers, and they have great forage in mild, temperate weather. So my whole thing is I told them, look, if you don't want to treat, you're going to lose bees. The unfit genetics are going to get culled out. The wild bees included, they're going to crash to the rate of 80-90%, and it's going to take a few years for them to bounce back and for survivors to start reproducing, so you can catch swarms. So you got to decide where you are on the spectrum at this point. Do you want to treat in the meantime? Do you want to treat forever? Do you want to just kind of do biomechanical treatments? Do you want to wait and catch swarms later down the road? What is it that you want to do? Just know that with everything, there's a trade-off associated. So in the United States, for example, we decided for the most part to treat. And you hear a lot of, if you don't treat your bees, they will die. What it does is that you're bypassing the selection and you're keeping unfit genetics alive, and you have to keep treating them for potentially ever, because they're never given the opportunity to develop their own resistance and tolerance of the mites. So instead of paying cash, like I was telling those backyard beekeepers in Australia, you have a choice. You could pay cash and cut your losses and just kind of, you're going to struggle for 2, 3, 4, 5 years until the wild genetics rebound and you can catch swarms of fit genetics. Or you could just get on the mortgage payment. So either you pay cash now, and after 3-5 years you're done, and you have strong bees, and you don't have to treat, and you don't have to worry about it. The bees have done all the work. Or you can do what we did in the United States and start treating. And then 40 years later, we're still treating. Not only that, but those treatments don't work anymore, right? We had 60% of losses on average for commercial migratory beekeepers last season, which was unheard of and triggered a whole bunch of panic because the treatments don't work anymore. So we have a choice. Do we pay for the house cash now? A little bit more painful right now for your pocketbook, but later you're fine. Or do you stay on the mortgage forever and ever? So there's a choice, and that's your spectrum. So anybody has question on the spectrum? No? Just find where you are on that spectrum. Decide for yourselves. Don't let anybody tell you how you should keep your bees. And just realize that you can change your mind based on what you're learning. You can go to one end or to the other, whichever way pleases you. It's up to you. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Yes, Stephanie.
I just want to say thank you. That's a phenomenal description.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I know you guys wanted to, somebody had seen that and they were like, let's do this. Yes. Locally adapted survivor stock. Thank you, Deb. Locally adapted survivor stock is that stock that's basically able to sustain a winter or two season on their own without treatments. And they do that through resistance to the mite. Resistance is knocking back the population of the mite through grooming, through all kinds of strategies they might have in capping, recapping, and through tolerance of certain levels of mites that are, other colonies that are unfit would not tolerate, and they would struggle with that. So locally adapted survivor stock finds its way through resistance and tolerance and is able to sustain a winter or two and to reproduce, to thrive despite the mites. And so those are the ones that we call locally adapted survivor stock. It's locally adapted because it was raised and mated in your local area, which is important because your forage, your sources of forage, your cycles of weather and nectar flow are going to be very specific to your area. And the bees develop their own adaptation to that very quickly. And so you could buy treatment-free queens from, I was in Wisconsin. I drove to Wisconsin. I'm a little crazy. But the point is that those queens are not going to do well in our Texas heat, right? And vice versa. So that's where the locally adapted comes in. Basically, your neighborhood mutts are going to be your best bet for your fitness in the area. Does it make sense? Yes, Melody. So I understand people can be worried about the genetics that are in the drone congregation areas. I got some. I want to remind you that all those queens open mate, no matter what, right? So if you're buying queens from Texas, they've been open mated in drone congregations in Texas. Most of them will have Africanized genetics. Africanized genetics doesn't mean hyper defensive. It could be. Yeah, it's not. There's no correlation. There was the honeybee lab with Dr. Rangel was calling for colonies that were Africanized to be able to test those genetics, and they got sent bees from all over Texas. People were swearing up and down they were Africanized. None of them were. So it's not, and you can have Italians that can be hyper defensive for some reason. The larger the colony, the more defensive it's going to be. The less food, the more defensive they're going to be. They're going to be very protective of any incursion in there. The weather will help bees get defensive. If there's a storm or something coming up, they know it before we do. They're better weathermen than we are, and they will get more defensive. So chances are you probably, so if you're in a very remote area where genetics haven't been diluted quite yet, and you still have remnants, pockets of really truly Africanized genetics, yeah, you can run into some issues. But in all likelihood, in anything that's kind of remotely, that's kind of like around us, some are urban, some are rural, not too remote, those genetics have been long diluted by a lot of Italian genetics and much more gentle, than Africanized truly. It's been almost 30 years. That's not an issue anymore. So yours are remote and you might have some issues. So consider that in your... Correct. So, and then you can always requeen if you have hyperdefense. It doesn't even matter if they're Africanized or not. If you have genetics that are hyperdefensive and you don't like them, you could requeen them with something that will be gentler, or at the very least pinch that queen. So the way to treatment-free, if you start with Italian treated genetics, you're probably going to set yourself up for failure, right? Because they're unfit genetics. They come from operations that are propping them up with treatments. And so if you have that kind of bees, don't worry. You could still cycle out those genetics. You could go full-blown right away. I'm just going to pinch that queen and replace it with a queen whose genetics I know that are, locally adapted survivor stock, certified whatever. And if you don't want to buy a queen and you want to do it with what you've got, you can always either pinch that queen on the nectar flow. The bees are going to replace her with an emergency queen cell, and then she's going to be less defensive most likely. Or you could just leverage the biology of the animal and compress them or don't give them any more space. They're going to feel congested on a nectar flow. Queen Rurine is always better in a nectar flow. It doesn't really work in a dearth. They're going to get congested and they're going to get swarmy. If they're healthy enough, they're going to cast a swarm. You can preemptively harvest that swarm if you're monitoring and see the signs and get that older queen into a split while they keep the virgin queens and she goes and open mates. And you've already cycled out those genetics. So there's many ways to address this, but at the very least, if you want to get started on the right foot, just do yourself a favor and use something that's already more resistant and more tolerant so you don't have that uphill battle. Does it answer your question? Okay. Yes?
What's your thoughts on community-based approaches when you have many beekeepers who adapt natural selection methods?
Mm-hmm.
Do those mutually reinforce?
Yes, so the question is about basically crowdsourcing or working with your neighborhood beekeepers to develop genetics that are better suited for natural treatment-free or whatever you're trying to do. There's a fantastic book by Stephen Riley, my friend in the UK, who is called The Honeybee Solution to Varroa. I highly encourage you to read that book. And yes, the principle was that he was networking with his local beekeepers to create genetics that were locally adapted, survive a stock, and through selective breeding, kind of got those specific traits that they were looking for. So by the way, what I do is colony level survivorship. I select the strong. I don't care how many mites they have. I don't do selective breeding. I don't select for honey production or anything out of grooming, VSH, virus-sensitive, high. I don't select for anything. I let nature do the work, and I select the strong, and I use those. What Stephen Riley does is selective breeding. So there's more intervention. So those traits are going to be more marked, but the whole colony as a whole might be a little bit less naturally resilient. It's just going to do those things that they're selecting for. Does it work? Okay. So, yes, Deb? The Honeybee Solution to Varroa by Stephen Riley in the UK. Great, great book. One more question, and then we'll go to Tabar, and then I can answer questions later. Yes?
I sort of have two questions.
Yes? Oh.
Would you happen to know if any of these organic treatments or chemical treatments have been applied or tested on the Tropilelaps model?
Yeah, so the Tropilelaps. So the Tropilelaps is another parasite that's coming from Asia that's going to be the next parasite to come into your beekeeper next door. And some of them have been, it's not as efficient. So the approaches that are being used, and I'm not very familiar with which ones have been used. I know that they use all kinds of synthetic chemicals and they throw the bathtub at it. They throw everything they can, and it's not necessarily even approved miticides. I think that the biology of the Tropilelaps will allow us to do really well in Texas because there's natural bird breaks and the heat and all that. From what I understand, it's going to be easier for us to be sustaining, the Tropilelaps in a natural way. Some of the strategies will be the same. Understand bee biology and the pest biology, and realize what makes them grow and what doesn't. And then from that standpoint, you can leverage that to get bees that are stronger, that are doing the selection themselves, I guess. Yeah. So more to come. I still need to kind of study a little bit more on that, but there's a lot of hope for Texas beekeepers for that. Yes, without treatments. Thank you for your question. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to talk about, so basically on one end of the spectrum, it's based on fear and dependency on those chemicals, and on the other side, it's based on independence from the chemicals or the interventions, and on more confidence into the bee biology, basically. Okay, let's switch gear. Who here has Langstroth? A few, okay. So this is what it looks like. A Langstroth commercial box is a series of stackable boxes that have frames in it, and it comes with a lot of parts, and you have to make sure that you have a bottom board, bird box, and then as it grows, you can add boxes with more frames, and then you have at the top inner cover very often, or at the very least an outer cover, right? And those frames, you can either build them yourself or buy them, already assembled, because let me tell you, it takes a while to assemble those frames. And the frames look like this. Yeah, there we go. They look like this, okay? There's 4 parts, and you have to staple them and assemble them, and then you can pop in or out a piece of what I call foundation. It's a plastic foundation with pre-embossed hexagon that kind of give a guide to the bees. I'm going to pass this one around. There you go. Actually, I should have gone that way. But this is called a frame. And so this is very much used by commercial beekeepers because they're very stackable. They're very, they can transfer frames and boxes and adapt them to each of the boxes. By the way, you want to make sure that it's all the same size. So the commercial beekeepers will use 10 frames. And then if you're a backyard beekeeper, I recommend 8 frames because those 10 frames can get really, really heavy. But they're not compatible with each other, okay? So that's why once you get one size, just stick with that size. But they're using forklifts, and they're stacking those bees, and they're setting them up. Remember, we're talking about pollen substitutes in areas where they're going over the carrying capacity. There's too many bees in one place, no food. So they feed them pollen substitutes and sugar syrup for that. So it's great for that migratory pollination. It's perfect for commercial migratory beekeeping, right? And it's also great for intensive production because you can harvest a whole bunch of frames and plop them in an extractor and then extract a whole bunch of honey all at once. It's what it's really good for. And who here is into commercial beekeeping? Yeah, we're all kind of small scale, aren't we? Okay. So you might be, what people don't tell you at bee schools is that this is what happens. You have a whole bunch of boxes and frames that you have to protect about 9 months out of 12 and store in your garage. And each box will take probably 3-4 boxes total. And then that means in the winter, you bring it back down, you take out all those boxes, you have to store them. And you've got, for each colony, you have 2-3 boxes full of frames. The advantage of the frames is that you can reuse the comb that's on plastic foundation to put it back in the hive and extract more honey. But if you're going to keep them over 9 months, you have to protect it from pests that are called wax moths and mice and rodents, right? So you have there's a cost associated to everything, right? And the other thing is that for beginners, it tends to be a little overwhelming. And you have a bunch of bees. When you rip the roof off, basically the bees are swelling up. They're losing their temperature control, their humidity control, their propolis vapor compounds. And you have to not only take those boxes and break apart. So the colony is an animal, right? So no matter how many boxes, this is your animal. And so when you inspect, you have to take out the boxes to go to the bottom to the brood box. So you're kind of like spreading the animal to the side. And things can be, a little tricky. You have to bring the boxes back together. You might squish some bees. They might not be very happy. So if you're using Langstrasse, that might be one of the reasons why they might be a little bit more defensive too. Yeah. And then there's a vertical axis, but there's also somewhat of a horizontal axis in those 8 frames or 10 frames. There's a little bit of a chimney effect. So in the winter, you might have the clusters at the bottom and trying to stay warm, and that heat rises above their head. So it's a little bit less efficient, and vice versa in the summer. My biggest drawback, that's why I use mostly tabac hive, is because it's very, very heavy. It's very heavy. Each box with 8 frame, 10 frames of honey will weigh very easily, and I'm holding my back just thinking about it, all the way up to 90, 100 pounds. If you haven't tried to lift that and move that to the side and do that with the next boxes, I encourage you to find somebody that will invite you to let you try that. See, some people don't have any problems with it, but I tend to have lower back issues, so I can't do that. So I guess not, Langstrasse is a perfectly valid option. And again, we're on the spectrum, so we decide where we are. I have all kinds of hives. What I'm here to do today is to introduce you to a different concept that some of you are already familiar with, which is horizontal beekeeping, and more specifically tabac beekeeping. So, show of hands, does beekeeping feel overwhelming at times? I've got 400, I will say yes, right? So does it feel unnecessarily complicated? You can do like treatments, you've got calendars, you've got recipes, rules, depending on the seasons, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? Does it feel physically challenging? Is it super heavy sometimes? Does it feel like you're moving things too much, bending, twisting, lifting, all this stuff? Guess what? It doesn't have to be that way, right? Does it feel expensive? Have you spent money on a hive before? And does it run about $250 per hive if you're getting a Langstrasse? Does it add up if you're adding all the pieces? It doesn't have to be that way, okay? And then does it feel like really you have to reverse boxes, you have to move frames up and down? Does it feel unnecessarily complicated at times? Does it ever feel that way? Guess what? It doesn't have to be that way. Okay, so the good news, and I've talked about that, some of you have heard me talk about that before, is that on the spectrum, you are a backyard beekeeper, you have a whole lot more options. You get to do whichever way you want. You can do the commercial, you can do the treatments, you can do the treatment-free, you can do the non-commercial and even non-conventional style of boxes. It could be any kind of alternative boxes that you want to keep. It's up to you because you're not using them for transportation and migratory pollination. Okay? So decide where you are. But mostly just know that 95% of beekeepers are like us. There's only less than 1% of beekeepers that are commercial migratory pollinators. So the vast majority of us have choices. We get to decide where we are on those spectrums, both in terms of treatment-free versus treatments, and both in terms of style of hives that we want to keep. And you can keep, I encourage you to try all kinds, because that's how you're going to learn the most about bees, is to see what they actually do. And the least amount of interference will show you more what the bees do naturally. So I like to say work smart, not hard. And mostly what I like to say is that it's simpler, lighter, and more affordable using a horizontal top bar hive. Yes, ChatGPT is awesome. So I presented that at the Midwest Honeybee Expo. So I've got slides on hive cost comparison. So the first line, horizontal top bar hive. Second is Langstrasse, and third is Layens. The beauty of the horizontal top bar hives like those is that you can make one of these in less than 2 hours with plants that are with just 5 boards, which is not much. And so we're going to count, the first column is going to be the frames or the bars. And the bars, you can make them for free with reclaimed wood, or if you buy the wood, they're going to cost you about 33 cents a piece. It takes about 30 bars for a full-size Taba hive. So it's going to cost you about $10 right here on the second column. Do you see my little? Oh, yeah, right there. $10 for that whole hive. Whereas the Langstrasse, each frame is going to cost you $4, and so each colony is going to take about $120 just in terms of frames. And in Layens, those frames are like $10, including the foundation. So that's even more. You're going to spend $250 just for those in the Layens. Those frames are consumables, meaning they're very thin and very, compared to a bar that I'm going to pass around. Please don't hit your neighbor with it. These are going to last you for 20 years, and they're not going to break. They're very sturdy, right? And so you're going to have no replacement costs on those, whereas a frame, after 5 years, maybe a little bit more, if you're delicate with them, you're going to have to replace them. They're consumables. And so this is where it adds up. The hive body and everything together in the total, the orange column, you're going to spend about $40 if you make it yourself for a horizontal Taba hive that can hold 2 colonies. So that's going to be $40 per colony, $250 for the Langstrasse, $600 for the Layens per colony, right? And so if you last 20 years in beekeeping, you have to replace the consumables, so the cost of Tabar is not going to change, but the cost of your other hives is going to increase by that much, right? 4 times cycling down. And then let's say if you're like me and you want more than just 1 colony and you have 30 after 20 years, all the red numbers is what the Tabar hive is going to save you compared to the other options. So if you know, there's a whole bunch of reasons that I like this hive, but cost and weight are the biggest 2 that I think talk to me, because I couldn't have built my operation of 400 colonies spending on all the Langstroth equipment as fast as I could have, as I did with my top bar. And my back would be probably broken by now, right? So I'm protecting my back. Just know that this concept of horizontal top bar hive, so bees are going to build comb straight from a bar. And they're going to use gravity. And if you respect bee space, each bar will have one comb. So that concept has been around since antiquity. The Greeks were already using that concept. Langstroth didn't invent bee space, the bees did. And the Greeks already understood that intuitively. They didn't know, they didn't measure it or whatnot, they didn't document it, but they knew. And they could use the same principle to get the bees to build comb on each of those bars at the top. It's a little simplified right there, but this one is the basket. The onset of the actual horizontal top bar hives with the slanted walls at 30 degrees has been around since the 70s. The researchers at the University of Guelph, Canada? Guelph, thank you. She's the Canadian in the room. So came up with that concept in 71. And so I will say May 20th, 71, because that's when I was born, and that's my birthday. Yes, World Bee Day is on May 20th. So that's kind of how I remember this. But the point is that now we have a modernized kind of a trough, which we have tools to build with wood and just cut the bars and everything. So it's basically 5 pieces. It's a trough with trapezoidal ends, 2 long walls, and a bottom board, and all of that is covered with bars. And that's kind of what that hive over there is, and I'll show you at the end what it looks like. You can add legs, or you can set it up on a table or whatnot. You can make it basic by wrapping a rain cover. You're still going to need a rain cover over those bars. They're all touching and forming the roof, but you still need a rain cover. So things like hinged arm will allow you to one-handed open the rain cover so you can access them, just like that one over there. Or you can go very crazy and just very creative, and just make like really beautiful hives and roofs and anything intricate and elaborate. But at the core, it's something that allows you to lift one comb at a time per bar, just like this one. When you're working it, you don't have to lift up an entire box. You're lifting up just one comb. You are going to keep it in the vertical plane. You don't want to drive a motorcycle with it, okay? Anything in the gravity will keep it in check, right? You could even do this, you could even do this, and you can even do that. But as long as you keep it in the vertical plane, okay? If you're doing any kind of twisting this way, the weight of it might fall on you, especially if it's a warm day and especially if it's heavy. So those are the only caution on how to deal with the comb. Let's talk about that plastic foundation that was going around. The advantage of natural comb like this is that the bees get to build the cell sizes that they want. They can optimize the organization of their brood nest, which, by the way, you can see right here. Oh. Let me backtrack for a second. You know that you can see the brood nests, the darker part where they had brood cocoons, and then at the top you have a band that's lighter. That's where they stored the honey for the winter. So in the winter, that brood is sitting right there under the bars. There's no chimney effect. That heat stays pulled right where the bees are, so that's much more efficient for them in the cold. And because that bar is so thick, that provides insulation right there, so it works really well both in the heat and the cold. Insulation is not just for the cold. Insulation is for any weather, as we know from living in our own houses, right? So the bees will thermoregulate inside, and if the thicker the colony, the wood around their nest, the more thermal mass they have, and the less spikes up and down in temperature, meaning it's a lot more efficient and a lot less stressful for them, which is also an advantage, because by going horizontal now you can make those walls super thick, much thicker than what you have in a Langstroth, for example, and the bees are going to benefit from that. Okay, it's going to be less stressful. The foundation itself is pre-embossed with hexagonal cell. Very often 5.4 millimeters is the size quoted. It's all the same. They all want workers. There's no room for drones unless you give them a frame for drone brood. Well, the bees will build cell sizes of all kinds. So at the top with that lighter yellow band, That's where the honey is going. Those cells are larger. And then as you go down the comb, the cells tend to be smaller and smaller, okay? And then sometimes, and I don't have a comb today to show you that, but about half of that comb might be much larger cells than the other side that's for workers, and then this side would be for drones. And what happens is that once the drone have emerged, they will use those larger cells to backfill and use it as storage for honey. So there's a lot more efficient that way, and they get to store their honey where they want it, where it's most efficient for the health of the colony. So natural comb, I encourage you, if you have anything that's foundation, to try it out, even if you have frames, especially if you have frames, that's going to provide extra, structural integrity, to replace and cycle out some of that comb on plastic for natural comb, especially in the bird's nests, right, in the bottom bird box. In the honey, you could keep the plastic, you can spin it, you could do whatever you want. But in the brood box, that would help the bees kind of organize a little bit more the way they want to, and you can cycle out this old comb like that, the plastic comb and all the old comb, and just give them some natural comb. Whenever you do that, make sure you sandwich it between two straight built-out combs so that they don't go so it's straight as well, basically. And start on the edges of the bird's nest, not inside. You just don't want to ever leave space in the bird's nest. It's not good for them. But so it helps maximize efficient nest organization, and it helps all kinds of things, and including vibrational communication capabilities and clustering efficiency, because it's easier to transfer the heat through the natural comb in the winter. Those heater bees do a better job that way. We're talking about culling out sanitary, old and unsanitary old wax. That's something that's going to help out as well. And you can see this is the horizontal configuration of a nest. That's going to help you, like we were talking about earlier, by cycling in new bars or new frames on the horizontal length troughs. At the front, through the bird's nest, you're going to cycle out that old beeswax that's kind of gross and harbors all kinds of pests and pathogens, mostly pathogens, and get smaller and less valuable for the bees. So imagine, so we always see the trunk of the tree and the comb of the bees hanging down vertically, but really, honestly, honeybees are cavity dwellers. They're opportunistic, and they don't care if it's vertical or horizontal. They don't prefer one over the other, contrary to popular wisdom. And so imagine in this case you have a tree trunk that's fallen, and they've got that comb that's being built horizontal, where the tabar hive will do a really good job of mimicking that, especially that thicker envelope, that thicker wood and thermal mass around it. So if you have the entrance at one end, which I don't recommend putting the entrance in the middle of the hive for various reasons, but just let me walk you through what the colony that moves into a tabar hive does. It will build, initially, the swarm will build the first few combs by the entrance where it's going to place its brood. And so it's going to build the first few combs, and this is your brood comb. All the dark brown is your brood comb. And then you're going to have extra combs that are being built for extra storage, backup pantry of honey, right? And it's going to be away from the entrance and in the back. And so what you've got here is the bird's nest by the entrance for airflow conditions. And then in the back you have your honeycombs. So when, and also usually you have a bar of honey. You remember that yellow at the top right here? Right at the top, and around slightly it comes down sometimes on both sides. That's an envelope of food for them to use in the winter. And then there's one by the front that they use as insulation and thermal mass as well. It's like their own insulation wall. And in the back of it as well. And then you have, between that honeycomb, that first honeycomb and the brood's nest, when it's season to rear its brood, there's an envelope of pollen, bee bread. And so that configuration is pretty much always the same, unless you mess with it, is typically when it's not. And so when you inspect, you're going to come from the back. You're going to smoke at the entrance in the front, distract those garbies. They're going to go, what's going on? What's going on? We don't know, but we're not looking in the back. When the beekeeper is opening the back 3 or 4 bars like this. I've got 2 bars right there, and let's say 3. And now I'm going to start traveling that hole, and I'm going to be able to inspect this one, and I'm going to start inspecting this one, and I'm going to start moving and going through my inspection that way without really opening that box, right? Because the only opening is between one comb and the other. So one comb is what's being really exposed here, not 8 or 10 frames at once, okay? So there's also fewer guard bees at the back, and they don't really notice you until you go through the brood's nest. So from that standpoint, they're going to be a lot calmer than in a vertical stack Langstroth, for sure. And even than a long Langstroth, because you're still removing boards that are like 3, 4, 5 frames at a time. So you're still more disruptive than if all the bars are still touching. So that really keeps them a lot calmer. And because it keeps them calmer and you're not letting the propolis compound and temperature and humidity get disrupted, they're also a lot healthier. They're less stressed anyway. But as soon as you hit, so you're going to go through the honey, and you're going to come and just hit the bee bread if it's a period of brood rearing. You're going to know what comes next. After the bee bread comes the brood. So you're going to push a little bit further, and you're going to now look at the edge of your bird's nest right there. And you're going to be able to see if there's open brood, capped brood, if there's signs of the queen, or if something looks off. If everything looks fine according to the season, you could just close them back. If you're not doing anything specific, let them be, and you don't have to chase for that queen. You just, now know that there's signs of her is all that you need. If you're worried that it might swarm, then you can keep going. If you're trying to requeen, then you can keep going. If you're worried the queen is not there and there's an issue, you can keep going and take a look further for either disease or queenless colony, or maybe there's something going on you're not sure. Then keep going. But you don't have to if everything looks fine. And that means your inspections are done in 5 minutes tops, and then you're done and your bees are not disrupted. I still have an apiary that had 20 colonies on top bars and 20 colonies on Langstroth, vertical. And a remover friend of mine came, and she was like, we started with the top bars and did the Langstroth next. And she was like, this is incredible. They were fine with us going through all the top bars, and now they're all mad in the Langstroth because it's a lot more invasive, right? So that was pretty obvious. And then, by the way, remember I said the bees don't have a preference? Well, if they have a preference, it certainly is not vertical, because in most circumstances, the removals are done. There's a lot of horizontal configurations in human structures, especially. About 80% of those removals are in horizontal configuration. So I'm not saying there's a preference. I'm just questioning the fact that people tell us they prefer the bill up and down. It's not true. They just don't have that preference. If there's a preference, it's not going to be vertical. Okay. So remember the honey was in the back? So it's easy to harvest and come back with your honey, and you can do cycling out by harvesting. You could do comb honey. You could do chunk honey. You could do crush and strain. You could do, on older comb, you can actually uncap and gently spin it. You could do, what else? The cut comb is, so in the Austin area, 4 inches cut comb costs, you can sell it for about $45, $50. Whereas liquid, I know, if you're in it for the money, comb honey is the way to go, because there's not much competition either. That's a niche market. And those are really good at doing that without having to buy a whole bunch of equipment to do comb honey. So they do that naturally. Oh, I forgot to mention, here, the bird's nest, that's where the queen stays. The honey is your queen excluder. She's not going to go and lay eggs in the back in the honey. So you don't even need a queen excluder from that standpoint. So yeah, you could also harvest those full combs like that and sell them to restaurants for, I don't know, $250, $300, right? That's the least amount of work, is to do cut comb. Now, if you want to do really liquid honey, which, by the way, honey is at its best when it's still in its beeswax envelope. As soon as you start spinning it and extracting it, you're exposing it to air, and you're losing some of the beneficial properties and the medicinal properties of that honey so that you know. So comb honey, least amount of work, best quality honey. But if you do crush and strain, and all it takes is to have like a stainless steel container with a colander and maybe a paint strainer on top, like a clean one, brand new. And then you can put your comb in there and just crush it and let it drain. Less work. And then once you're done, you grab that bag and you swish it in a pot of water for your lemonade. Now you have unsticky beeswax. You can throw it in your solar wax melter, which the sun's going to melt it all out. The paint strainer is going to filter out the cocoon. You have beautiful beeswax. I recommend a silicone pan for catching it, or putting water in your catching pan. But there's all kinds of, this is like super easy. And all that beeswax is going to help you do things like, soaps, candles, any kind of skincare products that have beeswax, food wraps. And because of that, I call this kind of hive just beekeeping that's better for the backyard beekeeper's back, budget, and brain, because it's simpler, and for our beautiful bees. So I call that B to the 9. B, 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 B. Anyway, cheesy, I know. But so if you want to try, you don't have to take my word for it. It's super easy. You could either build them yourself with our free, easy do-it-yourself plans, less than 2 hours, just a couple, 5 boards, a rain cover, and some easy tools, and you can make your own. They're available for free on the website. And so the key here is to follow those standardized dimensions. I came up with that concept because all the top bar hives were all kind of like different, and they were just not matching, so you couldn't buy bees from somebody and put them in your hive. I couldn't even, back in the day, I couldn't even take comb from one colony and put it in another one without invariably the comb sticking at the bottom and touching and crushing bees and driving me crazy. So I came up with the upside down assembly. So I did the math somewhere along my path. I did engineering school, so I was happy to play with that again. I'm a geek. And assembling them upside down gives you always the same internal dimensions, because you're going to have basically the 9 1/4 for the bottom board, and then from the edge of those trapezoid to where you put the support screws, 8 1/4. So from there, you slide your boards on top, and everything is always the same depth, no matter how wide your board. So you can make them using thin boards. You can make them using super thick boards. These plans work all the same for whatever thickness you want to use. And if you are interested and you're a business person, there's an opportunity for markets. If you sell these hives, or if you sell bees, the tabar nukes that fit in those hives, I will put you on our locator map. And I said that to people all over the United States, because then the more suppliers we have, the less friction to adoption we have. So my whole goal is to really standardize this whole tabar for backyard beekeepers, and putting the word out there that people don't have to spend a lot of money or lift a lot of weight, and they can just still do beekeeping in their oh, that's what I should have showed. This is the blue line, is where you have the 8 1/4 inch to that blue support screw right there, and that's where I slide the walls so that it's all internally the same. Those blue dimensions are all the same. So you can make little ones like this one is a tabar nuke that can be used for a small colony. It takes 10 bars. A young one, it could be for a split, it could be for catching swarms, it could be for harvesting honey, those beautiful honeycombs, and taking them back. It could be for queen rearing. It could be if you find your queen in there and you don't want to worry about finding her again or losing her in the box, you hold her in there temporarily. It's a great tool. So this whole thing is a system. And so this is the tabar hive that's over there. You can make legs underneath, or you set them on tables, or all kinds of things. Now, if you are interested in this, but you have Langstroth, or you cannot find tabar nukes to start them, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, it's easier for beginners to start with a tabar nuke, with a nuke, than it is with a package, because the bees, it comes with the combs already built. It comes with the queen and food and brood, and it's a young colony. A package is tricky because you have to keep feeding them. For brand new beekeepers. Once you have bees, it's a lot easier because you have comb you can give them and all that stuff. But you still have to feed them on a weekly basis until they're the end of their first year to make sure that they overwinter better. So my whole thing was like, not everybody can find top-bar nukes. So I came up with this concept that I went and presented in Copenhagen at Apimondia. That's called the Flex Hive. And basically, it's just taking a Langstroth and a top-bar hive, and then using basically the small version, the top-bar nuke box, which is what I called here, and then marrying the two. Come on, that's cute. And this is what you get. At its core, it's a Langstroth. This one is a 5-frame with one of those 10 bars. You could do 5-frame, you could do 8-frame, you could do 10 frames. You could do any size with supers like this one over there, and just still do honey production. You could do comb honey production. You could do top-bar nuke production. You could do anything based on what your desire is for this season or this time. Just kind of, you can change your mind anytime. Basically, that's the best of both worlds is what I'm saying. It offers a lot of flexibility. And so here's an example. This is a 10-frame with a 10-bar top-bar nuke. This is a double deep. This is with the supers on top. You could tack them on. Stephanie's got them on the end of her horizontal top-bar hives as well. This one is a double colony with 10 frames hanging from that. So basically, you can reuse your existing colonies and give it a try very simply and see if you even like it. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit the principles of that. But you don't have to, so if you cannot find a top-bar nuke, you can make your own top-bar nuke using that. And then you can populate your hives. And you could have a large colony. The larger, the faster it's going to build, which is why that double-decker and 10-bar is going to go to town once the nectar flow hits. And it's going to have a whole bunch of comb built in no time, as opposed to a 5-frame Langstroth nuke. You can find 5-frame Langstroth nukes anywhere almost. That could allow you to start one of those without having to resort to a package or a swarm, is what I'm saying. So this is what I presented at Apimondia. All of that is on my website. This is the QR code. It's basically my URL, b-mindful.com/flex-hive. All of that information on how to put it together in less than 10 minutes is there. It relies on the bee space, very importantly. So the shoulder to shoulder on the frame is 1 3/8. So is the bar edge to edge, 1 3/8. And if you tuck it against your first Langstroth, so you tuck that Langstroth frame to the wall and you have that first bar touching the edge of the shoulders, then you're respecting bee space, and the bees, without any guides whatsoever on the bar, will build that comb straight in the middle of that bar. So you don't even need a guides of any kind. Now, if you start a package, for example, in a horizontal top-bar hive that has just bars, you're going to want to put some kind of guide underneath that bar so that they don't build sideways across the bars, so you can still inspect them. What I recommend in that case is either a bamboo skewer glued in the center, rub some beeswax, and my favorite trick I came up with was take a thick shoelace about, this length, dip it in beeswax and set it on the center of the bar, and then let it dry, and now you have a guide for all of that, right? So do 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, how many, you could do all of them, but you really don't need all of them, because once they've started building the first 4 or 5, then you can use the last 2 and put a bar in between, or the first 2 and put a bar in between to cycle out this old comb. Are you guys following me so far? I know I'm starting to get really excited about all this, so I speak very fast. Hey, at least I'm not coughing anymore. So that bee space is super important for that. But this is a closer look. So that Langstroth wall, the shoulders of the frame is touching, and then there's a notch cut to the depth of the bar, so that you can bring that first bar and tuck it against tight, and it's not going to push over the Langstroth frame, and vice versa. So this is kind of what it looks like, and we can walk through it over there on that box. Putting it together. If you have an existing Langstroth box, you can do that. You can build one of these really fast with the same plans as for the big, large hive. And then you can remove one of the end pieces and then assemble this in less than 10 minutes. So you're going to attach a bottom board. That's going to be a permanent board and no entrance on the Langstrasse. And then the top bar is going to be where the entrances are. But there's a trick to that because it depends what you want to do. The entrance is where the brood is going to be, and away from the entrance is where the honey is going to be. So you decide what you want to do. If you want Langstrasse honey production, you put the entrance in the top bar side of things, and then they're going to backfill the rest with honey. You can still pop it in your extractor. Okay. If you want comb honey and you want to keep your brood in the Langstrasse, you put the entrance in the Langstrasse. You clog up all the entrances in the top bar, and that's going to become backfilled with comb honey. So it's really up to you how you want to do this. But you have to have that bottom board attached to control where the entrance is. And so the notch, the way I do the notch is I'm not going to take that. I'm going to take the Langstrasse box and I'm going to line it to the top of my Langstrasse box, and I'm going to trace underneath on the Langstrasse box to have the depth of my bar. You want to do it? Like if I were to look at this right here, so this is the super configuration. So I'm going to remove it, and you're going to bring that bar right here. Oh, by the way, these bars are tall side up because this is 1 and 3. This is not. Okay. So you're going to line it up right here. You want to do it?
No, I have a quick announcement to make.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. We were just notified by the bar and the food truck, there's 5 more minutes to order.
Last call.
If you want a drink, I suggest using your QR
For
code on
alcohol.
your table. And if you need food, if anybody needs to grab something, are we all good?
Yeah, just keep that in mind. Last call for alcohol, last call for food.
But feel free. Sorry, Nathan.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Thank you. It's important. So you're going to trace underneath right there to have the depth of your bar so that you can have it travel and tuck against the Langstrasse wall this exact way, right? So if you have shallower bars, which I did over there, then it's going to be shallower. But that's the first step. Then you take this and you remove the end piece. So you have this opening right there, and you're going to use it to trace right under that line, that opening. Then you're going to take a jigsaw. I know, but it takes less than 10 minutes. You're going to cut real quick through the opening, and then the notches on both sides, and now you're ready to assemble both, and you're done, okay, from that standpoint. So these are the assembly instructions on the same thing. It's all on the website. So I'm happy to share with you, but it's all on be-mindful.com under Flex Hive. And so this is what it looks like when you are putting the Langstrasse to assemble it. I like to put the top bar have vertical like this and put it like on top so I can screw it down. It's a little bit easier and a little bit less awkward. And then the bees will build their comb right there. So let's talk about how to arrange the Langstrasse frames based on your goals. So this is actually supposed to be a 5-frame Langstrasse nuke with a feeder. So it's really a 6 or 7 frames. But it's got 5 frames in there. And you can see at the bottom the little 2 lines, the black lines. This is your entrance so far. And so you're going to have typical organization is going to be honey on the outside, capped brood, something like that, and open brood in the center. That's the heart of your nuke, right? If it's a bigger colony, it's the same thing. But let's say you bought a 5-frame Langstrasse nukes to do this, okay? And then, so you're going to attach that top bar nuke right there, and now you're going to move that entrance to the top bar next to the Langstrasse, but no entrance on the Langstrasse. And what you're going to do is you're going to want to put the honey away from the top bar, because again, honey is a queen excluder, right? So you're going to put it away. And then you're going to use the capped brood, which eventually, when it emerges, is going to be replaced by honey. It's going to get backfilled with honey. And then your open brood is going to go towards tucked against the top bar, okay? And they're going to start building. You're going to put that first bar, and you're going to put all of the other bars. And they're going to start building, and you're going to have basically open brood shifting around the entrance, right? And they're going to start the capped brood, that brood's nest. They're going to reconstitute that structure, and then that honey is going to be backfilled in the back, right? And so you've done it too, right? And so you can harvest that honey just the same way you would with the Langstrasse. And now you have some, I forget what that is. If you travel that entrance, they're going to move that brood around it, and you're going to have even more capped brood, which is then going to be turned into more honey, and so on and so forth. So then you keep going to the back of that, which is now the front of that tabar, and your open brood is going to be all there. So now you can do a split of tabar colony, right? You could take that comb, and you could, if you wanted, you could harvest all the honey and move all of that into a tabar. So you bring the tabar to where that colony is, and you swap out, right? So that still allows you honey production, and now tabar nuke production, or population for that big tabar hive, right? But you could do it whichever way you want. And so you could do the opposite and just have all the brood in the Langstroth, and all of that being backfilled with comb honey. So you decide. And you can have those supers on top. So like this one, Stephanie, do you mind putting this one? If you want more comb honey, you can put that on top with your frames, with the plastic foundation for spinning and all that stuff. And you could have it even bigger. So if you have a really tall colony, you can do this, right? So what speeds up the process? Anytime you have a heavier nectar flow, bees are going to build and backfill with honey. They're going to build brood and food, and they're going to pack it in. So anytime you have a nectar flow, that's going to accelerate this. If you don't have a nectar flow and you're in a dearth, guess what? They're not going to build comb. So you're going to end up having no buildup in this. So just keep that in mind. Yes, Miss Kara?
What encourages the bees to build comb?
Nectar flow. And the age, their appropriate age, but mostly what encourages to build is the nectar flow. Yes. Anytime, it might not be right away, but as the nectar flow establishes itself, they'll first put the effort in building up their population, and then building comb. Especially with the new bees coming up of age, their beeswax glands are going to activate and combine that with the nectar flow, and all of a sudden you have a whole lot of buildup. Yeah. And so the season's upon us. It's coming. Especially Kim was mentioning some nectar flow coming in. They might not be there at the stage of building comb quite yet, but as soon as it hits heavier and those populations start getting bigger, they're going to start building this comb. And you're going to start seeing frosty, white beeswax getting layered on top of existing comb and or new frames or bars. Obviously, a larger colony will build a lot faster than a smaller colony. Okay? So that's why you could do a 5-frame nuke and do this, but you could also do an 8-frame, 10-frame, double-decker, extremely big colony, and that's going to take off a lot faster, like wildfire, right? And then if you block with food barriers, you're not going to get any brood on the other side. So those are the conditions for that expansion. So, but basically, this is the flex hive, the tabar hive, the way to work all of them, and I can walk you through some more of that. You see the 3 entrances. This is to bring the brood further and further from the Langstroth. If you want, there's a workshop this weekend. There's another workshop next month on the 13, 14, 15. And I have also apprenticeships somewhere on the table if you want to learn more about this. But in the meantime, who has questions? Kelly.
Hey, Nellie, thank you so much. This is really helpful.
Did it help?
Yeah. Can you go back to the slide where you talk about introducing the Langstroth brood into the flex hive?
Yes. So one of these,
The frame order. Yeah.
the very first one.
Yeah, the very first one. How would you, you would do that? That's
So it was like this before. Thank you. They was like this. Here, I'll pass this around if you want. I mean, you don't have to take one. Just if you want one, take one. So the colony will build the broods typically in the center of the brood's nest, and then you have capped brood, and it might cycle depending on how many cycles they come through. But then the honey typically is on the outside of the colony, right, for insulation and for food purposes. And so when you marry the two of them like this, if you move the entrance, so the open brood goes around where the entrance is. So you had here, the entrance was right there under the open brood, right? So this is where they prefer to put their open brood. And so when you marry those and you move that entrance and you are going to rearrange this comb to be honey away from the tabar, because that's your barrier to expansion, that's your queen excluder basically. The capped brood, you're going to rearrange it together, and you're going to keep the open brood right there by the tabar hive. And then as you put your first bar and all of the other bars, sorry, I went too fast. First bar and all of the other bars, along with a shim at the back if you need one. You want all the bars to touch, and you want that cover on the Langstroth. Now the bees are going to start building, and they're going to love that there's no plastic foundation. They're going to build that much faster on natural comb, right? So they're going to go to town, and they're going to start putting the open brood around that new entrance, and they're going to start rebuilding the structure of the nest around that entrance with the honey away from that entrance in the back, because you already had drone comb. So they're going to use it, and they're going to backfill it with honey. Okay. And then as you move that entrance potentially a little further in the top bar, you're going to have a reorganization similar. You're going to have the open brood following that entrance, and then the honey is going to get backfilled in the back, right? And you keep going that way. So you're going to have now the open brood furthest away from the top, the Langstroth, and then capped brood. This is a pretty nice size colony. All of a sudden you have 5 frames and 10 bars. That's a pretty nice size colony already. And they're going to same thing, honey in the back. That's the same as the image that we had at the beginning with the top bar, the nest, and the honey, except it's reversed in this case. Okay? I should probably do it the other way around.
What you're showing here.
Yes, the entrances. Notice that on a Langstroth, there's no entrance, because my goal would be more to use that for extraction and the top bar for brood, so I can put some into the top bar hive. Yes. So does it make sense? Yes, Melody.
If you have mean bees, this is a perfect opportunity to do a flex hive. That's
Yes.
what I did. I put them all in put the mean bees in the lane on a flex, and they built up.
Oh, they did for you. That's awesome.
They were just miracle workers.
And they love it. It's like all of a sudden your colony is on steroids. They build so much faster. Yeah, but yeah, and then you can move them into a top bar, and they might still get. Yeah, very good. Very nice. I'm glad to hear that. Other questions? Yes, Riaz?
Top versus horizontal.
Top bar versus horizontal lang.
Horizontal height, yeah, length.
Yes.
Shrubs. What's the difference?
Oh, the difference is that you're using frames in their horizontal lang, which is also called a long lang or a coffin hive. And so you can, you can use your vertical stack and spread it horizontally that way. So the advantage is that you don't have to change system. You just reuse the colony, and you just reorganize it the same way. I would recommend reorganizing the same way, right? With the brood, the entrance, and the honey in the back. It's using still frames. So if you're going to use and start a colony, you're going to have to buy all that equipment. So the advantage is that if you already have that equipment, you can just move into it really easily. But it's still consumable. So after 5 years or so, you're still going to have to replace the Langstroth frames, which is more expensive. You're still using plastic foundation, which is not necessarily, you can phase it out. You can, cycle it out. One of the issues, so it's a good alternative to a vertical stack, okay? I still prefer top bar because I don't have to open anything more than just a comb, half a comb and half a comb. It's just a very small hole, and I don't have to, open up the boards or the whatever over the Langstroth frames. Also, this is a trough. There's very few seams and nowhere for pests to hide anywhere, as opposed to any frames, especially with the inner covers. You have a lot of hive beetle hiding places, wax moth and all stuff. You still have that in any frame hive, whether it's Langstroth, long Langstroth, or Layens. Any frame hives has a lot of that, and it also has a lot of crush zone because it's using a ledge to rest the ears of the frames onto, and so you have a lot of crush zones there as well, which you don't necessarily have with a top bar. So I'm going to show you something, by the way. When you're closing the comb with a top bar hive, you're not crushing any bees, and that's super easy. I'm going to move this like this, and let's say I want to close. I'm going to take my bar, and I'm going to take the bottom edge of that bar and lining up with the top edge here of this bar, making sure that I'm not cutting any heads. And then once this kind of lined up and I've got contact, I'm going to keep that contact vertical, and I'm going to slide it down. And so the bees that are underneath are going to get pushed into the hive, and the bees that are on top are going to get pushed do this, yeah, you're gonna crush bees. But with this, you don't crush hardly any bees. And that means the bees are staying calmer and nicer because as soon as you crush bees, guess what? They're coming after you, right? Because they don't like when you crush their sisters. And so the Langstroth from that standpoint and putting those boxes back on or even those Langstroth frames at times can be a little tricky to not crush bees as well. So I think that's about it. Yes, your question.
No, you have time for one more question.
One more question.
Can you show how you feed them?
Yes, okay, so I didn't get a container. Usually I have one.
I'll grab something.
But there's several ways to do this. Again, you want to feed inside the hive, and you're going to want to feed in the back of the hive. I'm going to go back here.
Pretend
That will work,
Pretend.
kinda. Yeah, thank you.
it's not the right thing, but.
No, but that's okay. That works better. So you see where the back. So obviously, if they're built out and they have comb, honey, and all the way in the back, they don't need feeding, right? So, but if you've got a comb that's growing, there's a lot of space in the back, right, where there's comb right now, where it's more like this, right there, for example. Then you have space in the back away from the entrance, and you can take a jar, so usually a ball jar or a plastic soup container or yogurt container or something, and you can you can fill it with the syrup and then poke holes in the lid, and over 2 sticks or pencils you can put it in the back, and the bees will come underneath and lick that syrup and use it that way. So that's a low tech, easy peasy, just kind of do it that way. Works for Stephanie. It's worked for me for years. But then I was like, well, we need a little bit. People, my whole thing is like top bars looked a little janky, and I wanted them to be a little bit more fancy, sexy. And so I came up with this design, which is wherever.
On the table over here.
Thank you. Oh yes, thank you. Thanks, Don. Which is in hive, it replaces 2 bars, and it has so you once it's in there in the back again, you need to have at least a shim before the comb so that they don't attach that doesn't violate bee space. Otherwise they'll tend. So if you have this right there, they're going to attach that comb to the hive. So you're going to want a shim in between, or another bar, or several bars. It could be all the way in the back of it. And so this is going to fit. This is designed to the same internal dimensions. You're going to want to make sure you center it so there's bee space on both sides. So that doesn't touch one side. And because it replaces 2 bars, everything's still closed, and you can just open this and fill it. And the bees will come and under the bar here inside the hive will go in and get the syrup that way. So I call that a top bar feeder. I'm going to pass this one around. Say what?
How do you keep them from drowning?
So they actually, the walls are fairly porous, and so they can climb up and down that way. That's another reason I like the pro suites, and because they tend to be to drown less in it as well. But you could also, if you're not comfortable with the way, if they've got any issues, you can throw some sticks in there, some wood sticks, and they'll float and use those as rafts.
Some quarter-inch hardware cloth?
You could, that's what I've done that before, yeah. So you can drape it, so make sure you don't plug the whole thing. You can actually drape it on some part of it inside and just kind of let it dip into the bottom, and that's a good ladder as well. So I'm going to pass this around. So this is in hive feed. Does it answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. What's your name?
Jess.
Jess. I'm Natalie. Nice to meet you. I try to remember people's names with so many new people. Yeah, so if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer no matter what, whether you're a customer or not. I'm totally fine. I want people to be successful doing this. So just let me know if you have any questions at any points. So with that, Stephanie, I'm going to let you take back over.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I thank you all for coming. Before we move, we have limited time right now, but I am going to do a raffle drawing in the background. But I want you to still have time to mingle and look at the top bars and the nooks.
And I'll walk you through some of this stuff
Yes,
as well.
so Natalie will meet you there. But before you go, just my own curiosity. First of all, I'm blown away by all the people here. I think I
That's
counted
amazing.
50
to come back. Thank you. Next month, it's the 12th again in March. The second Thursday, we will meet here, and then we're talking about moving the following month to maybe Wimberley so we could be closer to some folks that are down that way. So TBD. Please follow us on our Facebook page. If you haven't done so already, anybody here, could you let me know, show of hands, who got the email notifying you of this meeting? Okay. And who found out on Facebook? Okay. And other people, how did you find out about it? She told me. And I messaged people. Okay. Thank you. That just helps me figure out.
We just came for a drink and had these t-shirts on.
So for those of you who don't know, Mike is the past vice president of the club. So yeah.
Yes.
Wouldn't have done it without my wife.
2 years ago. Mike and Kim. Anyway, I'll let you mingle. I appreciate you. When I call numbers out, if you're paying attention, we have door prizes, and I'll try to do that in the background. But please take a look around if you would like to talk to Nathalie some more, or
What time do they have?
any of us. Well, we're supposed to be kicked out at 8, but I think they'll leave us alone. Let's just say we have till 8:15. But I think the bar and the food are done. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you.